Hello, Sandro.
Hello, Alberto. How are you?
All good, all good. So the idea here is to have a very brief conversation about your cool topic, interaction design, interaction driven design, and we will try to make it fit in a reasonable amount of time. It didn't really work last time. The night we actually met, it ended up like a very long conversation to 4 o'clock in the morning. But I guess this shows something, shows passion. So it shows. Well, let's dig a little bit into that. So, can you tell us something about this interaction-driven design?
Yeah. So my goal was to find a way to design software based on behavior and not on data, on state. So the premise for this is that every time that I discuss business requirements, normally verbs will come up, right? So the product owners or whoever is in charge of the requirements, they will say, I would like our users to verb, or we would like to verb. So there's always verbs, but we keep designing according to nouns and states. So I wanted something more related to behavior. And the reason that I called interaction is because the interaction is the interaction. I would like to start from outside as well. So, for example, I believe that a backend should only exist if there is a front end, or a service should only exist if there is someone to consume. So we are always providing behavior to the external world. So I thought that it would be better if we modeled from the external world inwards. So that's why I call outside in design. And interaction-driven design is an outside-in design approach based on the interactions that the external world will have with the system and the interactions that the different components within the systems will have with each other. And so interactions more because of the verbs, is the actions. That's the thing about IDD.
Yeah, actually rings quite a lot of bells. I'm actually working in a very similar way lately, and with maybe even exploiting the flexibility of stuff like CQRS, like I need to see some data here in order to make a given decision, and this decision will be implemented with a button, and this will trigger all the action downstream. But yes, we start from a user has a problem on a given screen and needs the data to make a decision and the button to transform this decision into an action, and then of course needs to see the consequences. So actually a lot of stuff kind of resonates.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you get into this mindset? What happens in the team, or why did you get into that?
I think that one thing that happens naturally is to be more focused. I felt that when we just focus on the domain model first, on state first, we end up creating a lot of hypotheses, and we make a lot of assumptions, and that's totally fine when we are exploring a problem domain. But if we start coding like that, we end up building a lot of things that we don't need, or creating things in a way that when you try to put all those pieces together, they don't quite fit. So there is a lot of waste in there. But coming from outside, what I felt is that it focuses the teams, and it also allows them to work closer to, for example, people doing the design, the interface of the system with can be product owners, whoever is designing either the APIs. So they focus the teams to say, what are we providing to the external world? What does the external world want from our system? So I think that any design methodology that focuses on outside-in design will have this effect. And IDD is one of them. Responsibility-driven design from Rebecca Wirfs-Brock was a good inspiration for me and has a similar effect.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that really clicked here. Like, yes, you're delivering something. Somebody's going to be happy about the value. Now I can see it on the screen. It's happening in the back end, and so on. I also really felt exactly the same pain. Like, if you focused on the nouns, well, coming from a domain-driven design background, I know exactly how much ambiguity could be carried on by using nouns, because everybody thinks they need a customer, and then you don't need all the customer data. You just need to maybe block the customer from a given action, or to renew the subscription of a given customer, and not all the data for this. At the same time, the pain here might be, if you just focus on one action, you might feel like, well, I'm missing the symmetry. I need the reverse action. I mean, I'm registering a new customer. I need an action to delete, and maybe you need it, but maybe you don't need it now. I mean, I just end up having a lot of stuff which is non-symmetrical, and I have to live with this pain. So, okay, you're nodding. Now I want to see your your feelings on this.
So I believe that these assumptions that we will need something else because you created one thing, we will need the other, is what lead us to convoluted domains. And I think that focusing on the actions allows us to build software incrementally. But if you start exploring, like, okay, there is one thing that I need to say. This design approach is not a replacement for domain exploration. I completely separate domain exploration and building the software. So one thing is, for example, EventStorming is a great technique in my view for domain exploration. So things like the way that you're going to build and design the system doesn't replace the exploration of what you want to build. And for me, the exploration should happen anyway. And if you're going to use EventStorming, if you're going to use any other technique or value stream mapping, whatever that is, to explore what you want to build, is fine. Once you understand if you really will need the delete function, so the register and the delete and the update or whatever, then you just build them outside in. But you already defined that A, that you're going to need, and B, how they're going to be triggered from outside. And then you can prioritize them and build. And also you already decide through the domain exploration which actions you're going to cluster into a service and which actions you're going to be putting different services, or the bounded context, for example. So all those things. So this is not a replacement for that. The domain exploration is still there. Finding bounded context, everything.
Yep. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, if I get it right, so you see the exploration. During the exploration, our brain is wired to look for some symmetry. That there is no way out. I mean, we see state machines. We have a computer science background. You got to close what you open. You got to destroy what you created, and you will look for this. But business-wise, you might live in a place where you can just register customers, and well, we don't have the delete function for a couple of weeks because is not at the same business priority. So okay, we can get to we can survive many iterations without it, and then okay, one day this will be really necessary. Let's go with this. And okay, fulfillment, feeling of completeness in the architect's mind. But this is not necessarily the dominant perspective over a team, because we have business might be the most important one.
Exactly. So they can then, whenever the time comes, they might decide, do we need to delete a user? Do we need just to disable a user? Do we want to keep history of the user? Do we want to throw away the, so all those things? But that will become a proper need.
Yep.
And then we implement.
Yeah. And when you have the need, you have the clarity in order to understand, okay, what is the expected behavior now? Because now I have the need. If I was just deleting it, well, the choice between actually deleting it or disabling was an assumption without an answer, without the question. Okay, now we have the question. Now we have a person coming with the question, and we know what the best answer might look like. Okay, great. Just didn't have enough information before.
So there is an interesting thing about, as I said, I keep very separate the exploration, how can I say, prototypes or anything that you are just trying to discover something from actually building, right? So I don't mix the two. And then there are techniques like EventStorming. I think there's a great technique. You even came here and worked with one of our clients, and so it was really great to see in action. And then there are the traditional data exploration that I find also very useful. That is very data-driven, like how these data, how they relate, how do I partition. So they are different perspectives. I don't think that they are better or worse than anything. They're just different facets that we need to explore in order to come up with a plan to build the system. Another one that we use is an outside-in approach as well. So what we do is, for example, you take mock-ups, and then you draw mock-ups with a tool like Balsamiq, for example, and then you start clicking. When you click in there, where do you go? You go to this page. What do you see in there? Oh, you see this data. Where does this data come from? So, oh, when I click in there, what do I want to see? So exploring these user journeys from outside gives you a lot of insights as well. And as you navigate through the flow, you might even decide, oh, okay, am I touching different bounded contexts? I prefer to call them functional areas because I just prefer. So I think that is a better term. So is this touching different functional areas of my organization, or like my products, my stock, my payment side, or whatever? And you can see that through the navigations, but then you click. This will work well if the thing that we are building has a good UI. There's a lot of interactions through the UI. When we were building, for example, when I was in an investment bank, we had a single entry point. There was a queue. Well, we have a few queues, and then the message would trigger a full flow. But there was very little interaction from outside. There was just a message in a queue.
Yep.
And it would trigger a big system. You can still do that. From that input, what should happen with that message? What should happen? Oh, I need to enrich that, or I need to explore this bit of the trading message, or I need to report that to a different regulator. So, and the funny thing about this outside-in exploration, this exploring this behavior, is that in the past years, the tool that I've been using the most is a tool that I used in the early days of my career, that are sequence diagrams. I use sequence diagrams a lot now because it allows me to trace, to design the flow at a very high level. I can do that at a code level, method level, but I can also do it at a very, very high level, just exploring bounded context and what the path that the flow would take.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, there's another thing that I was taking another note, but I think you mentioned that, talking about the functional areas and bounded context is also not only functional areas. There's something that I was reading when on your article about interaction-driven design, which has to do with the focus and the responsibility of delivering value for a given area of the organization. Well, this is the topic. This is the value that you need, and now the team is focused on that functionality. And I actually love to see that. It depends a lot on the size of the organization, but being explicitly committed with one business goal, and it actually changes a lot of things. And can you tell us something about it, about what happens with this approach in the organization?
So as I said, interaction-driven design is one way, is one flavor of outside-in design. And it's much closer to the code than anything else. But I have a talk called A Case for Outside-In Design. So this talk I created this year, and it goes all the way from domain product exploration all the way to start coding. But so in this talk, I talk about even things like impact mapping, for example. Yes. So you can and you can mix tools like impact mapping and product box and many other tools that we have to give the business priorities. And from those priorities, then you can go into one of them in one of the functional areas and say, how would we provide that? So what is so we know what the value is, but how would that be provided? And that's when you start designing your front end or your API, so they can naturally focus the team. As soon as they provide this behavior, they can bind that directly to whatever they discussed in the impact mapping, for example. So it's fully based on that. So yeah.
Yep. The thing that there's something that happens in this area. So the moment is the moment you focus on the most on the highest value portion of the application. Actually, the system is telling you really quickly if you're doing the right thing. I mean, if you're delivering this functionality and you're going to do it faster because you're focused, but then you go live with this one, and well, maybe you got a bad idea, but probably you were hitting on the right spot, and well, you get answers, a lot of them. So one of the things is maybe you get more ideas that will bring revolution to the whole backlog. Like you look at your old backlog and well, this is so 90s, this is so vintage that like we have better ideas right now. And at the same time, the fact that you focus, you will have early feedback, and for me that was a surprise about how big this was changing the behavior and the attitude of the team. Like in many organizations, it was like the attitude was let's write some code, let's wait some weeks, maybe months for the code to be deployed, and suddenly let's get random feedback about code that I completely forgot, and it's wrong, and I don't even remember why. And while if you have shorter cycles, you can still get good and bad feedback because we still can make mistakes. Then the feedback is about something that I've just done, and I can correct it. I can get into, I'm learning and getting into the right mindset, and this is completely different.
Yeah, I think that adding to that is what I also felt is we want to deliver incrementally, right? So this continuous deployment.
Yep.
So I found it very difficult when you go straight to the domain model and you don't think about everything that is outside your either your architectures and database or even your UI, your APIs and everything else. I found it very difficult to work incrementally or to have incremental, quick incremental, valuable increments, quick valuable increments into the system. And I think that when you explore from outside, you know exactly which feature you want to implement. So it's much easier to draw this vertical slice and even decide how thick it will be, right? It can be a very thin one, or areas will be a little bit bigger than others, but it's very easy to slice because we are considering I will come, so there will be an action coming from outside, so the external world will trigger my system, and the external world expect this result. And it's much easier to focus on that incremental value.
Yep. Cool. Now, there's another thing that I wanted to ask. It's just like we talked a lot already about it. Where we met, like it's actually about your company and your organization, which is quite special. I saw it in the early days. It was very interesting to discover your attitude to healthy growth and to establish. It's not even a code of conduct. Actually, it's the philosophy. But yeah, I don't want to label it. Just can you tell us something about it?
Oh, I don't know. Like Codurance started from the thing that we believed, right? So we started the software craftsmanship community in 2010. And for 3 years, almost 4, we were deep inside the software craftsmanship community. And by the end of 2013, we had the opportunity to start our company, Mesh and I. And so Codurance is an extension of that. So we didn't change the way we see the world just because we now own a company. We still have the same mindset that we had as developers, but it is now great to, when you are on the other side, I mean, like you are hiring people and we need to negotiate and stuff, it opens your eyes. But the ideology, the beliefs that we had, they are still the same. And Codurance was built based on that, the whole software craftsmanship principles and values, with developers at the center, like the 2 founders. Right?
And how is it? What do you have to do any change, any evolution?
We did. So Codurance is now just over 5 years old. we started with things like, for example, we have open salaries. Everyone knows everyone's salaries, even across countries. So salaries are all by peer review. So peers evaluate their own peers and they decide their own salaries. So there are things like if people want to change things in the company, they can create an initiative circle. There are a few rules for that and stuff, but they join together. If a significant number of people agree that there is a problem in there, they start an initiative circle and they're empowered to change whatever in the company. Mesh and I will only join, only join those initiatives when we feel that there is a threat. And so when we feel there is a potential, for example, there is a financial risk or a reputational risk, or the fairness within the company can be impacted. So otherwise we don't get involved at all. And even when we do get involved, we get involved in terms of showing a perspective and say, like, have you considered that this might damage our reputation, might have an impact in our financials, or may create some unfairness within the company. So that's when we come in, but more to guide than anything else. So a lot of things in Codurance, they evolve through initiative circles and peer reviews and things like that. But we had, for example, answering your questions. So those are things that are quite interesting inside Codurance. There is this focus on learning and apprenticeship and everything else. There are a lot of interesting things. But for example, one change that we are making now that I was not expecting when we started is we are becoming a little bit more structured in terms of career progression. But this was a thing that our people wanted. Now that we are a little bit bigger, and we're a bit older as well, so people said, like, how do I progress? Like, and they want something a little bit more structured. But that was a thing that I never thought that we would do.
Yep.
Now as we get more diverse, the general needs of people are changing, and then we are adapting as new people come in and they have different needs.
Awesome. No, it's weird because there's something that you do that we are trying to do as well, like open salaries. This is something which is happening also in Avanscoperta. We don't have an explicit review process, also because we are small, but everybody has access to all the information. And so if there is any problem with that, it's happening early. Just like, well, what about these? And is not we are not sitting on a ticking bomb like it happens in some other companies.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny to see how maybe you don't need so much structure at the beginning when you're relatively small and so many things are already inside the ideology or the friendship or the implicit assumption of the culture of the people that join the initial organization. And later, well, you got to make sure that these things are going on. But it's actually cool that you let it go a little, let it happen without you. You don't have to be the engine. You're just like a part of the bigger game with maybe a little bit more stakes in the reputation and in the finance, but not the puppeteer.
Yeah, there is one analogy that I like to use. For example, you take any big city, right? So London, for example. So of course you have problems. You have people coming from all over the world with completely different cultural backgrounds and different belief systems and everything else. But in general, the system or the society still works. It's not collapsing, right? So when you see this, it's quite an interesting thing. So in a company, it's the same way. As you are growing, you are getting people with different cultures, different backgrounds, different belief systems and stuff. But there is one thing that allows them to work. They need to have a common foundation, right? So there's a common thing that most of us in a big city will share. So we won't kill each other, right? So when you see each other, right? For example. So, but there are a few things we will say good morning to each other. There are a few things that we will do so that we can live in harmony. And in a company is the same. So you need to make sure, as the founders or people running the companies, that you define what this common foundation is.
Okay.
It's not about culture. It's underneath culture. Culture comes on top of that. right? So you have a different culture from me, right? We come from different countries, we have different upbringings. So, but there is a foundation that we have underneath the culture that we have that we share. And this is what we need to worry about when we're running a company, is that the people that we bring have this foundation, and then we let the culture grow on top.
That is actually awesome. Now I sense the danger of starting a larger and longer conversation, and that could lead us anywhere. Like this, in one way, the great thing might be like, well, you're basically showing that you can build a software company without trading off between quality and financial sustainability. And another question for me might be like, is there any probability that this might happen without a technical person leading the company? Or
So I'm not sure if it's about being technical or non-technical. I think that is more about the goals of the person running the company or the founder in general. So, for example, I don't know how Codurance would be if we had external investors, right? We don't. Codurance is completely self-funded by me and Mesh, and we are 50-50% in the company. So there's no decision that all the decisions can be made inside the company. We don't need to satisfy anyone. We don't need to have targets or revenue targets or headcount targets or any of those things, right? So because we don't have that, so the founders decide the speed that the company grows and everything else, because there's no one to satisfy besides us. So I think that it's more about that than being technical or non-technical. Being technical, of course, that when you have a software company, 95% of our people are developers, right? So they are consultants, and it helps a lot if the two founders understand the work that they do,
yep.
and how to help them to do a better job. So yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I don't have that much more to ask. I'm just like, actually, I'm looking forward for your class when you're visiting us in a few weeks. And I guess we're gonna meet in the classroom. So yeah,
absolutely, to be a pleasure for me. I'm really looking forward to be there and see you all, and we can continue this discussion as well.
Awesome. So thank you very much for today, and let's see you soon.
Thank you very much. I'll see you soon, Alberto.
Have a great evening. Bye.